and welcome our next panel to the stage. This next panel, all of these panels, just really quickly to set expectations, are for the Web3athon hackathon, which is a hyperlocal, people-first crypto hackathon. All of these themes are the challenges we're posing to our attendees to think about what do you want to do to make your community better? And so this next panel is really exciting about that because it's on sustainable community and culture. And I absolutely adore the moderator for this panel, who is Trisha Wong, the co-founder and director of CRADL. And Trisha is an amazing tech ethnographer. Her experience in tech spans many, many years and started with the first text messaging technology all the way to understanding data privacy in Web 2. But what I love most about Trisha is, as I've become her friend, is she's a really active participant in all of the communities she's a part of. She really lives where she is. She knows the names of everyone who lives on her block. And one thing Trisha does for fun that not many people know is she's a salsa dancer. And most people I know who have hobbies are like, oh, it's just this thing I do for fun. But what Trisha told me when she told me she did salsa is that salsa is like dancing through history. Because if you look at the influence of drums in salsa, it comes from the fact that salsa traveled through the Americas and was influenced by African slaves and the use of drums they have. And I think it's just such a great example of how your life can be so much richer when you have an understanding of the culture of the things that you're doing. And also, how much better the tech we can have is going to be when we have that understanding how culture is worth preserving. So let's welcome Trisha Wong to the stage so she can introduce the rest of our panelists.
Thank you, Catherine. I did not know you're going to bring up the salsa thing, but that makes me very happy because that's the whole point of this Web3athon, is that we have amazing panelists who are real human beings and have real interests that they're bringing over to Web3. So I'm going to bring up Kevin. Kevin Seo is, Lauren Sirota really found them here and, at South by Southwest in Austin, but Kevin is a restaurateur, and you created the first NFT restaurant, Bored and Hungry. I'm sorry, I can't even read my own handwriting. You're also the co-founder of the first NFT group. And then we have Jordan Cooley. And recently, Jordan is a CRADL researcher. She's been, researching City and coins, which she's going to talk about. But one of the reasons why we hired Jordan was, even though she's got this intense policy background and she does, criminal justice and juvenile justice system, is that we found out that she also was a bartender and that she was actively working as a waitress. And then she also does organizes poetry slams. And we were like, that's a real human being. That's someone who can actually work and relate to people and make people understand Web3. And then we have Gary Sheng out here coming up of Dream DAO, Chief Innovation Officer. And Gary actually started out as a programmer at Google. And then he realized well, maybe my life needs more meaning. And he just kind of quit. And he says this on his website. I'm not making this up. It's not private conversation or anything. And he then was like, maybe I should give back to society. Not that you're not giving back if you're a Google program, but you personally felt like you needed to do more. And so then you went on to work with Civics Unplugged, and your work is to train civic leaders all around the world. So we'll be talking about that more. And then last and finally, we have David Casey, who I was so excited to meet David backstage for the first time, because all of your work is, I love that you put that you were an organizer in your bio, that you organize social movements. And that's been a part of your work all your career. And so we're going to hear about what you're actually building, because you have done so much and so much through the Web3 space. And we're going to hear about what it means to not to be an issuer of stable coins, but to be an issuer of stable credit. Right? Stable, is that right? Am I saying right? Okay, I want to make sure I understand that. And what I also loved about that is you're doing what you call a full stack monetary toolkit. And you also live in Berkeley in California. So those California vibes up for all of those who are watching out in the audience. So here we're talking about sustainable culture and communities. And this is one of the third challenges of our Web3athon with the theme of hyperlocal. The reason why we chose these speakers to come up is that one of the most critical issues of our time is how do we actually make sure that communities have a way to be resilient, who can thrive without being dependent on hierarchical institutions that have typically controlled access to resources, be it currency, be it money, be it land. And so while what we're here for is actually to talk about, what are you actually doing in your community that's different, so that all the builders out there, so you can feel confident, all of you come from somewhere, all of you live somewhere, all of you know your community somehow. And all of that knowledge can come to use. Whatever you're doing here, you can actually bring to the Web3athon. And I think these four people really, really bring that example out. Now, I want to actually start with David right now, because you are a builder, tried and true, and I really want to hear from you. What are you building that's actually going to like enable communities to be sustainable and to sustain their culture?
Thank you, and thank you for hosting this beautiful gathering. Yeah, so we're building something called the Resource Protocol. And in one sense, it's really simple. What we're doing is bringing a monetary system that's in some measurements 40,000 years old, barter, on chain. And this is something that we've all done, probably. Has anyone here bartered before, like traded things without money? Cool, okay. So what we're doing is bringing that activity on chain and allowing you to trade within your network or community. So it's
why do we need a chain for that, though? Because I can trade right now.
So I have a story. Some Lebanese business community approached us, and we said the same thing. There's barter networks. Mutual credit is the name of the system, or barter. And these networks exist all around the world in Web 2. And we said, look, there's Web 2 barter software. It's going to take us a while to build. Why don't you just use that? And they're like, David, I don't know if you know what we're going through right now in Lebanon with the hyperinflation, but we're never trusting a centralized institution again to manage our monetary system. The only way we're going to do it is a decentralized public network that we can really trust.
So when you hear this, I'm curious, like, Jordan, you study city coins, and they say the same words as David, which is like, we're decentralized and we're not relying on systems. But tell us like what city coins is, and because it sounds like it should benefit people who live in cities. What are you seeing?
It's been a lot of reading through the Discord to kind of read between the lines. It's been
what is city coins?
Yes,
kind of frame it up for us.
It's they're essentially trying to introduce a new financing structure into cities, right? They believe that there isn't a lot of agency within residents to be able to decide where funding is allocated, and so City Coins is trying to offer an on-chain solution where they put in stacks, they get City Coins out, that stacks is then redistributed to people within the ecosystem who are staking on-chain.
So their currency is called stacks.
Their currency is called stacks, so it's an anchor cryptocurrency. You get city tokens out from the smart contracts, but whenever you put the stacks into it, right, 30% is sent into the city, similar to a tax. 70% is then redistributed to people who are staking, or what they call stacking on their chain.
Okay, so it sounds like everyone should benefit. What are you actually seeing then? Is it actually helping sustaining culture in communities?
From what I've seen, no. A lot of what they're doing is kind of just replicating the current model. They're not looking at hyperlocality. They haven't researched economic or community development models. A lot of what they're doing is mirroring actually the 1970s, 1980s economic development, and we've seen what happens in that regard. Trisha, you did a great, I think, opening yesterday for the Web3athon, showing how highways segregated cities. We talked about it this morning at the panel on the main stage. And what they're doing is not doing the due diligence to understand what infrastructure, whenever it's built, how it's actually going to impact people, specifically people of color and communities of color.
I'm curious, David, before I hop to Kevin and Gary, but like as someone who's building something actually supposed to solve for sustaining culture and communities, what are your thoughts on like how is what you're building different than City Coins? Because it could be similar to someone who's just sitting in the audience and hearing all of this for the first time.
Yeah, so I don't know too much about City Coins, but what we are doing is building financial infrastructure, open source infrastructure that any community can take, customize to meet the needs of their own community, and rather than the city issuing credit from the kind of like top down, each person, each merchant, each freelancer can issue credit. So it's like actually decentralizing the issuance of credit itself.
It actually sounds like what, Jordan, you're looking at is very like top-down centralization.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they like to say that it's for the people, but it's really for the token holders who are already in City Coins. But a lot of them aren't living in New York or Miami or even Austin, where they're trying to launch coins or have launched coins.
Okay, it doesn't sound like it's like hyperlocal. That's like pretty simple.
Yeah.
I mean, and so talking about like, Kevin, what is it that you're doing? Because the reason why, when Lauren came back and she said she met you, she's like, wow, I met this group where they've been able to raise money, but not depend on a top-down issuer. In this case would be a bank when you're trying to start something, right? Like, what are you doing that is so different and new?
Yeah, so she says really nice things about us because we fed her, so she's extremely excited.
What did you feed her?
What we did was before, Food Fighters Universe is the first NFT-backed restaurant group. So instead of going through traditional funding and creating different food concepts, we decided, why not let the people fund us and just try something a little bit different with shared utilities and different types of perks along the way, because we've been in the food industry for a little bit of time, and what a lot of people don't know is in the food space, there's a lot of activities, events, community activations that's all involved. So then people are always asking us, how do we get the inside track to these events? How can we get more involved? How do we eat more of your food? So because of that kind of sparked the idea. But before doing our own project, we wanted to give back to the existing communities out there, and we used a very well-known one of the first utility or heavy utility NFT collections, which is Bored Ape Yacht Club. And so that's where we built Bored and Hungry, which is we utilized our ape 6184, and we utilized our ape to create our restaurant, and it created a lot of buzz. And luckily, and we know that everybody really loved our food too.
For those who just don't know what an ape 6184, like specifically 6184, but also apes in general, can you just break it down really quickly?
Yeah.
What are we talking about?
Sorry, yeah.
NFTs?
Yeah, so if you guys have seen in the media or Web 2 media, Web 3 media, you see a bunch of pictures of apes everywhere. That's Bored Ape Yacht Club. The reason why we chose this NFT collection to create our food brand around, at least for the first concept, is it's almost like the current universal language of, oh, I kind of know what that is. That's an NFT, right? So a lot of people see this image now and starting to become part of pop culture. And the reason why it blew up so quickly is because it was one of the first NFT collections that gave you utility. And one of the big utility pieces is utilizing the IP for free if you purchase the NFT, and that's what we did.
That's incredible. So in terms of just community activation, it's just so crazy that as a restaurant, like someone who actually makes food, first of all, your food must be good, and that's why you raise that much money,
yes.
Right? Okay, really good. Like, I don't know yet because I haven't been fed yet, but Lauren verifies, and I trust her, taste. So, but what would you recommend to the builders out there if they love cooking? Like, how did you bridge from cooking to Web3 NFTs? Like, how does that jump even work?
Yeah, so a lot of it, honestly, it comes from, I talk about this a lot, restaurateurs and people that enjoy food. Am I going in and out of the mic, by the way? It's like,
I think.
Oh, it's okay. Oh yeah, it's just me? Okay, just by myself. Okay, cool. Okay.
Talking.
Yeah, okay, awesome. So, when it comes to restaurateurs, we're all a special breed of crazy. And the reason why I say that, a restaurant business fails 50% of the time in year one. Year two, you're gonna fail 70% of the time. Take that crazy energy that you guys are already risk takers and do your own research and learn something new. And for us, when we saw this innovative space, we didn't want to just sit back in the audience. We wanted to participate. We wanted to make a ton of mistakes. And we made a ton of mistakes. You guys are seeing some of the successes of what we've done, but man, like even purchasing the ape was insane. Like it took us a long time to do it. And then on top of that, we got our NFTs like stolen. Like it was crazy.
What? How much did it cost, the ape?
The ape itself cost us in USD, you guys are gonna think we're nuts, but it was $267,000.
And how did you get that money together?
So for us, we pitched this crazy idea to a bunch of good people in our network, and they went along with us, and that's how we got into the first Bored and Hungry. Yeah.
Amazing. How, David, with building your protocol out, how would something like what you're building actually, like how would someone like Kevin, a restaurateur in a system?
Yes, please tell me.
Like how would he be using what you're doing? Because it sounds like there's a natural kind of alignment here.
Absolutely. So yeah, the first go-to-market, we're actually going for local food supply chains, local organic food producers. And so restaurants can use interest-free credit lines. Barter is basically interest-free credit because there's no banks to charge interest. It's just peer-to-peer in the form of resources, products and services. So you guys could get a credit line at 0 interest, spend it on ingredients, and then you pay back the network when customers come to you and buy from you.
So this conversation wasn't pre-discussed. So I'm sitting here like learning this for the first time. I'm like, what? Okay.
I mean, and Gary, so I actually wanted to ask you, I purposely am like asking you last because you are training the future builders of Web3 and the future civic leaders so that we can actually have sustainable culture and communities. Like when we first talked, you were like, this is exactly what I'm doing. And so from your perspective, like can you explain to the audience first, what are you doing? And two, like what's going to happen if your DAO is successful? What are we going to see? You know, what's going to change for everyone here?
It's a great question. And I first wanted to say, like, the CRADL team is doing such a great job. Like, I put on a lot of events in my life, and like, the fact that you put this together in 8 weeks or something like that is just, it's absolutely mind-blowing. And also, just want to shout you out for having Dream DAO was not planning to go to consensus, and your team reached out and said that we understand your mission, and Web3 will not realize its potential if your group is not here, right?
Yeah, and you're here, right? Yeah. Where's the Dream DAO team here? Yay!
Right.
Woo! You're all joining Web3athon.
But so what we do is we're creating this missing on-ramp for impact-oriented, not necessarily technical, diverse 15 to 20-year-olds that want to make leverage Web3 to do good in the world. And I think like all the older people are still figuring out how to do that. And speaking of like sustainability, I think like let's talk in like 5 years to know what ideas actually ended up lasting. But we're in this kind of beautiful experimentation stage where I'm personally very excited about the fact that we are placing 12 of our young members in meaningful internships at Regen Network, Cello, Gitcoin, Refi DAO. Like, organizations I personally also didn't know just a few months ago.
Said all my friends' names.
I know, right? Great people. But what success looks like is, I think Hyperlocal is a meme that I think is going to take the world by storm in a really good way, because I think we've outsourced our like health, wellness, happiness to these kind of faceless or well, basically these faceless corporations, like our
like the one who employed you?
So I wanted to joke that, you know, when you want to break up the company that you're getting paid by, it's probably a good time to leave. So I worked at Google. And so I think I've been thinking about decentralization for a while, but what I didn't think a lot about was Regen. I didn't think a lot about Hyperlocal until I met so many of these amazing people like Gregory in the back who have been doing the work. And so I'm like a kind of glorified hype man for different young people, for different organizations. I'm just like connecting dots, and thank you for being the hype man of our organization. Hype person.
Gender neutral.
Exactly.
Yes. Well, Gary, can you give a specific, concrete, like, example of what do you mean? Because you really hooked me when you were like, we are training the future civic leaders who can actually be proponents of democracy, not democracy, but democratic forms of governance. So what exactly are you doing to train these local leaders in different parts of the world? And how are you doing it through a DAO? Why do we need a DAO for that?
So we're super early, just like a lot of DAOs in the space and organizations. But one of the less spoken about benefits of all this talk about DAOs is it's sort of it's helping spark a missing, like the civic renaissance that it has the potential to help spark the civic renaissance that we badly need, which is the civic spirit, the desire to contribute to local communities or just small communities that could be globally distributed. But like, you know, we had at Civics Unplugged, we had the decision to either teach Web3 by recommending a bunch of like lectures and whatnot, or help them learn how to contribute to Web3 by building the machine that is empowering them, right? So our young members are called builders because they're actually building the DAO that is helping them secure opportunities to become greater and greater contributors to Web3 in the world. And just in terms of examples of hyperlocal impact, I think it's super early, and we know that we need to, we want to support hyperlocal initiatives that already exist by matching our young members with them. But we also, we're in talks with, for example, I'm personally in talks with Chance the Rapper's team in Chicago, who've been working with local high schools and teenagers for years. And they are so excited about this idea of potentially creating block clubs, which it sounds like it was intentionally made by Web3 people, but it's just like neighborhood people supporting their neighborhood, right? And to whatever extent Web3 can be useful for that, that's an open question. But let's channel some of all the attention and energy and capital that we're generating here to help the most marginalized people elevate.
So what does a DAO have to do with this, though? I still actually don't totally get it, because I'm like, it sounds like you can train a bunch of young people to do this. Why do we need a DAO? Sounds a bit complex. Like, what does a DAO actually do, the DAO governance infrastructure? Can you explain that?
Absolutely. So part of why the DAO movement is sparking a civic renaissance is because who was talking about governance proposals before Web3? It's actually amazing. It's like, it's making some of the most otherwise boring stuff sexy, right? And we have to really appreciate that. I don't know how much.
I think people were talking about governance. Actually, I would push back. It's like participatory budgeting. I mean, we have so many examples of people who have talked about governance. But what is it about DAOs that are different now? Because there's something unique, but I'm really trying to pull it out of you.
I appreciate
what is it?
you pulling here. So when for DAOs, it's kind of like at least for Dream DAO, we're seeing it sort of like a training ground for young people to develop these civic aptitudes that could then be applied to much trickier environments, right? New York City, Chicago, these are very politically challenging environments to try to change, right? Even in the smallest aspect, right? So you develop agency through safe, almost like training grounds, but it's not academic exercise, right? The proposals, for example, to decide which conferences our young members get to fly to next, that actually that goes from idea to then discussion, refinement, and then actually action and deployment of funds, right? This is the exact same process that you theoretically go through in any sort of more local democracy. And I think it's beautiful that through Web3 they might have the opportunity to develop the skills that might make them really effective local city council people.
So it's actually transparent, the deployment of funds.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree with you, right? In so much that this new technology, yes, participatory budgeting has been around for a long time. You've seen it in Chicago, actually. But there's this idea, I mean, we see it, there's a reason why a lot of politicians are like, go out and vote. We need young people to vote. And we had the most young people vote in the 2020 election. But there's a lot of disillusionment in local government and state government and federal government, and giving people the tools and teaching them the technology which may run the government, which may run financial services in a way that they're like, oh, I am starting in at the ground floor in a DAO, right? Using the technology to not only figure out how to move proposals, but how to organize themselves. I see a great, potential in that. That seems phenomenal.
I mean, it sounds like community activation, which is, Kevin, something you talk a lot about. And I'm curious, why would a restaurateur, why would you talk about community action when people are like, oh, that's just food, it's just a place? How does that have anything to do with sustainable culture and communities?
Yeah, so even before the NFT space, one of our partners, Andy Wynn, he's not here due to some family stuff, but he's not here. So our partner, for 8.5 years, he came from actually the streetwear industry. And so he really understood what culture and lifestyle and community could really do for a brand. And he took that same mindset and brought it to food. We partnered with him later on, and he's been able to do some amazing things with some of his brands. Like, for example, when you marry Delicious Desserts and Hello Kitty, you're going to have lines out the door. Just imagine that. I'm sure many of you would love to check that out and taste what that purple pink drink would be with a Hello Kitty cover on it. I mean, because you're activating two communities, and it's super Instagrammable, yeah. And then, so that's just an example, what we've been able to do with brands in food, right? Where like BMW wanted to have a cafe in downtown, so we converted our cafe in downtown to a BMW cafe.
How does that actually benefit communities? With what you're doing, especially by involving NFTs?
So where the NFT part came in for us is that the last few years it's been pretty devastating in our industry. There's been a lot of more despair than anything with a lot of the restaurateurs and a lot of our peers in the industry. And every time we were because we do like monthly meetups and networking with other entrepreneurs in the food space, and it's a lot of like complaints and sadness and, oh man, nobody wants to work here anymore and whatnot. And we wanted to encourage them by showing that, hey, we're doing something innovative and still exciting, something new to bring eyes back into the kitchen, back into what we do. So when we're talking about retention, how do we get new people to innovate and stay excited about the food industry? We have to stay innovative and excited, and that's kind of what we did.
What's one example that you've been innovative? Because I would love for you to share up that was quickly this product idea that has come out, because this example for builders out here of where you can be doing something and you're like, oh, if this product doesn't exist, I can make it.
So we had to I'll go really, really fast. So in Bored and Hungry, because it was based on Bored Ape Yacht Club, they released their own currency, ApeCoin. They did it literally when we announced when the restaurant would open. So the internet went crazy and asked us if we're going to accept ApeCoin. So nobody out there was able to process this as a payment for food. So we just got together, our devs went crazy, and we made a POS system overnight. And it was absolutely insane. And we took ApeCoin that day, and the whole community exploded.
I want you to hear this, because this is a perfect example where the idea did not come from the devs. I mean, they may have been on your team, but it came from you being in the food industry and hearing that there was a need, and then coming up with a product, right? But you were listening first, and then you went into build. And so I would love to end on just like a quick, what's the one piece of advice that everyone has before you get off on stage for all the builders out there? Like, for how you ended up here? Like, what's the one piece of advice that you have?
So I'll start. I think a big part of life is following your passions and following things that you believe have purpose and meaning to you. And if you end up in that place, you're going to be solving problems for a lot of other people and having fun doing it.
Community is nuanced. You're not going to be able to know everything about everyone who is there. What you can do is be adaptive, flexible, you can listen. And I think it's really important to do the due diligence and the work, but also don't stress out, don't be anxious at like, oh, I'm not going to be knowledgeable enough about it. But you can be open enough about it.
Kevin, and then Gary, then we're gonna go.
My mind is completely blank, but please be in a brand new, going into any brand new industry is scary, but just like how you did before, take the risk and take the chance.
I think number one, it's being grateful for every opportunity that you get. It's awesome that I get to represent Dream DAO on the stage. I'm grateful to know you, and I think that if you count your blessings every day, you will likely have more blessings in the future.
Well, I think the takeaway is that you hear from everyone here is that to be humble, and especially for the builders, is experiment. All of these people have been experimenting and failing. You know, they've been failing for so long, starting different companies and then succeeding in different ways. Like, we're all experimenting here. And so that's really why we have this Web3athon, is for you to experiment and to fail together and to learn together, and most importantly, to listen together. So thank you so much. We can't wait to get you to submit your challenge.
Oh my goodness, what an amazing panel.